Hey guys, I'm back this week, and this time it's about sports. All my faves, all my favorite teams, how I got there, and why I stay. Let's get into it. So this week, we're talking about my love and obsession with sports. And my love affair with sports has to do kind of in the same realm of my love of all things anime. I love a good competition. And sports is, for me, the center of any competition. I think I told y'all in the past that I could watch any battle shonen or any even cooking competitions. Like I'm down for that. And I rediscovered this past year my favorite thing to watch over the summer was the strongman competition. So yeah, I am down for a good competition, and sports is the basis of that. So let's get into kind of all the sports that I watch or take in and what drove me to that. So number one is easy. Football has always been a love of mine, and it really kind of was the basis of all things that we talked about kind of as a family, my mother and my sister included. But my father really had a love of kind of explaining sports to us, right? And to me, it's like, if you ever watched Harry Potter, you've seen them play wizard chess. So it's kind of a version of wizard chess for me. And I think it's funny to me because Danny and I were at a restaurant once, and they had a couple of playoff games on, and she was asking me, like, now, why did the person do this, or what does that penalty mean? And we ended up having to go over like a broad overview of all things football. And I had to say, like, I watched the NFL. I haven't gotten into a college team yet, and I think that college rules differ. And I'm not really sure about divisions and all of the bowls, so I'll have to get into that at some point. And she was like, I think I need to pick a football team. So in between Danny and my brothers, we always go over the schedule when they come out for the upcoming season and try to figure out, like, what games may we want to go to, and do we have time for that? Are we going to travel for that? Depending on the sport, you might have to travel for that because while there is, hockey in my state, it's not in the actual city that I live in, but the team that plays for the state actually does play where I live, so in football. And so you're just trying to figure out, how often are we going to travel? Are we going to do home or away, or that sort of thing? So sitting with my brothers is trying to figure out which football games do we want to go to. Are your teams playing the home team or not? So there's that. But for my brothers and I, particularly for me, it started with my father, and he was a huge football fan. Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, and or Sunday all day football. And I remember we didn't have a whole lot of money growing up, but we did have, when we did get money, my parents went out and got a Sega Genesis, which was a big deal at the time. But we had two games, right? Sonic 2 and I believe Madden 95, right? And so whenever we as kids were playing, it was one of those two things. And thank God for, Hollywood Video, Blockbuster Video, because then they started allowing you to rent video games. And so we didn't really buy much else because we could just, rent it for a week or whatever. But anyway, Madden 95 was a staple in our house. So much so that when John Madden passed away, my brother and I were like saddened, like we knew him personally, but but anyway, I remember, us wanting to play with Dad. And at the time I was like the oldest, and I couldn't have been no more than like 8 or 9. And my siblings were much younger. So there's at least a 5-year difference between me and the next brother. But I remember my dad saying, like, this is not a game like Sonic the Hedgehog, where you're just kind of pressing buttons. And I'd like to argue that Sonic is a strategy game. But he said, if you're not paying attention to how the play is designed to be run, you're not going to beat me. And that was when I started paying attention to every position on the field, who played what position, what everybody's job at that position was supposed to be, how to call plays, because there's a way to do it, and what down you should call certain plays on, and when you should punt, that sort of thing. And I think it was many years after that before I could beat Dad, though. But not only like actually looking at the play, actually looking how it's designed to be run, the X's and O's and things like that. And I'm here to tell you, playing Madden since 95 to what it is now, it looks drastically different. And I'm here for the upgrade. Some changes to things need to happen. But as a kid, we kind of we never missed a Super Bowl. We always watched. It was always exciting for me to pick out players, offensive and defensive, to keep an eye on and try to see whose team. We all had different teams, to see whose team made it the furthest. My poor brother, he's an Atlanta Falcons fan. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Like, he's endured a long time. But I'm talking to y'all as a Cowboys fan, so it's not any different. But, and then I realized that the Cowboys and the Falcons only play like once every other year or something like that. I don't know. But there was always rivalry. My brother did the right thing by picking the home team where we grew up, because it was easy to turn on a TV and see games in Atlanta that featured the Atlanta Falcons. But I mean, Sunday came along and then everybody's game was on TV, which I, am grateful for the NFL for at that time. Don't get me started on trying to watch games of any kind nowadays, but whatever. But I vividly remember my dad saying, like, you have an affinity for, really liking players that are the running back. And so you really seem to like Emmitt Smith. And I did. I remember like writing a paper on Emmitt Smith's like career, and my teacher didn't understand a word of it. And so I felt some type of way in the 5th grade because she marked me down, and she did not understand me or even try to, because I was like, oh, he's averaging like 6 yards a carry or something like that. And she was like, what? Even if you didn't know what that meant, you could probably figure that out with context clues. But she tried to make it seem like I was speaking another language. So, sad. But the great thing about football was that, I moved around a lot. And it was one of those things that no matter where you went, the kids were playing. Even the girls. It was great. So I tended to relate to people in terms of sports, which, when you're in elementary school is probably the easiest. That stopped being easy right around middle school, because then only the boys played sports, and then you were weird if you into sports as a girl in middle school and high school, but whatever. But yeah, it made it easy to kind of be in the mix and talk about the Super Bowl and head to Super Bowl parties and try to see what kind of offense this team is running versus this defense or whatever. I'll never forget Terrell Davis and the Broncos in their Super Bowl. They were playing the Atlanta Falcons, and it was a big deal in Atlanta. I was probably in the sixth grade, and everybody had to don their Atlanta Falcon attire, and then everybody was going to get bonus points and a pizza party, and it was just a really big, really great time in the city in '98. It was sad that they didn't win, but I had an affinity for running back, so I had an appreciation for Terrell Davis. It was a good time. And my brother, you should have seen it. My brother was strutting around the house because his team had made it to the Super Bowl. My oldest brother, after me, was a huge Atlanta Falcons fan, but then the brother after him really liked Keyshawn Johnson. And so there was a time after the 1998 Super Bowl where, Keyshawn had gone to Tampa Bay, and everything about Tampa Bay was dominant. From Warren Sapp to Warwick Dunn to Mike Allstott to Keyshawn Johnson to John Lynch. So we sat down and had to kind of pick apart my youngest brother's team when we started playing Madden for PlayStation, because he was damn near unstoppable. It was ridiculous. But yeah, my introduction to football came from Madden 95 and my dad, and like trying to have bragging rights when you're dealing with both my brothers. Being a Emmitt Smith fan was a big deal for me, because I was like, this is a small guy. He's doing it real big, and he's like dominant in a field where people are larger than him. And I was pretty small for my age, so I was like, I could be Emmitt Smith if I want to. It didn't help that the Little Giants came out, and in that scene where John Madden's bus stalls and pulls over, he's one of the athletes that comes off the bus. So good times. So it kind of solidified me being a fan of his. But I remember like begging my mom to let me get an Emmitt Smith jersey. And I mean, I wore that thing nonstop. So of course it's a replica jersey. So after a while, the numbers and even the Dallas Star like started like peeling off of it, and I was devastated. And then I grew out of it and had to hand it down. Devastation. Seriously. And I think shortly after that, jerseys became very expensive. And they kind of wanted me to lean towards more versatile things to wear. But I was like, I could wear a jersey every day of my life and be all right. It doesn't matter to me. But I think both my parents were like, we do want to go to a dinner party, so you can't wear a football jersey. Or can you? I had the Scholastic Book Fair was probably the best place for me to get Emmitt Smith posters. There wasn't a year that I went in there that they didn't have one that I didn't have. And so after a while, he was like all over my room wall. And like my mother, this is of course prior to my love obsession with NSYNC, but for a while before Justin Timberlake came along, it was Emmitt Smith. And my mother was like, you have to constantly put these posters up. Absolutely. And they weren't like the paper kind. They were like real like card stock, so you couldn't roll them. It was good stuff. And I remember being heartbroken when he was traded and then ultimately retired. So people, ask me now, like, I think I was like 8 when I picked the Dallas Cowboys, because of Emmitt Smith. But, you know, you had Dion and Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman. So the Cowboys had a lot of people to choose from. But people ask me now to this day, like, how did you get to be a Dallas fan? And I always say it would seem weird for me to pick another team just because Emmett, you know, left when he went to Arizona, or then, you know, that he retired. So I'm like, I'm just here for the long haul. And sports fandom is the fandom of all fandoms. So when you tell people that you are a fan of a team in a city that you had not gone to, they automatically called you a bandwagon fan. So I think at one point during 2013, 2014, the Cowboys had won like 13 games, 14 games or something crazy like that. And I was celebrating it. And like, I couldn't tell you how many people called me a bandwagon fan. I was hurt to the core. And I'm talking about people who claimed had gone to school with me for years, right? I'm, you know, graduating from college in Atlanta. All of you people have gone to school with me for many years. There's no way that you didn't know I was leaving the Scholastic Book Fair every year with an Emmitt Smith poster. And somehow in 2013, it's unheard of for me to be supporting the team. And I said, you know, when your team does successfully once in a while, the word bandwagon jumps out at you. So there's that. But I'm not going to touch on anything. I've been disappointed for a good many years now. So I would like to make it out of the first round of the playoffs at some point this year, guys. Let's be serious. Okay. I don't usually, like, if people ask me, I'll tell them, or if I'm wearing a jersey, they'll know. But in recent years, I've been leaning towards other sports because there's not a lot to say about my football team. And I enjoy football in general. I can go and watch a game even if Dallas is not playing. Probably even more if Dallas is not playing recently. But I don't usually advertise being a Cowboys fan because a lot of people think we're delusional. And on some level we are. You need that when you're following a team that hasn't done well in a while. And I know how to pick them, so there's that. But I'm not one of those people that's under the impression that it's going to be our year every year, because I do think there's drastic changes that need to be made. And some decisions that have been made in the past that didn't make any sense to me. But I will say, no matter how much I like sports or football or basketball and or whatever, you know, off season is a hard time for me. People being traded is a hard time for me. It's not, it doesn't matter what sport you're talking about. We get a good team. I start getting to know the guys on the team. I am copacetic. I don't like change. And so I always have to remind myself, like, this is a business. And so business decisions are going to be made. But I am going to say some decisions that y'all make in the off season just don't make any sense. I don't know if y'all know that the end all be all is to win the Super Bowl, this trophy, that trophy, the cup, whatever. Do y'all know that that's the end game? Or is it the end game? Do I not know? I don't know. Because some decisions y'all make, I'll be like, I don't think that's going to, I don't know. Anyway, so there's that. When it comes to hockey, I think I told y'all a lot of the kids' movies that I watched were kids' sports movies. And I was first introduced to hockey by watching the Mighty Ducks. The more that you spend time in the hockey community, you learn not to say that, because a lot of people hate that. But again, I was a person that lived in Atlanta. I was in a time where a lot of people, black people, didn't watch or partake in hockey. So I remember asking an uncle of mine, he said, what do you want for your birthday? And this is like after I had grown out of my Emmitt Smith jersey. And I was like, well, this is more like these hockey jerseys are more like a sweater. So it shouldn't be a problem. I can wear these anywhere. And I do. But his response to me, I was probably like 9 or 10, and he said, well, black people don't play hockey. That would be weird for me to buy you a hockey jersey. People would think you're weird. Newsflash, people thought I was weird anyway, but it had nothing to do with hockey. But when you're watching the Mighty Ducks, they had several black hockey players. So I always thought that was weird that was people's response to me, So when I lived up north for a bit before we got to Atlanta, anytime there was a game on, I was watching it. Not that I knew what was going on, but, we lived in a town just outside of Boston for a little bit. And, when you live up north, it's very easy to find a hockey game on TV. And again, don't make me stress how hard it is to watch television and get a sport on without having to pay an arm and a leg. But, when I was a kid, I used to always turn on the TV. And I think every time I turned on the TV, I want to say the Rangers were on. And even though I didn't know what was going on, I knew that the crowd was dynamic. And I was like, I could go to a hockey game. And, I was born in Queens. I could be in New York watching a game right now. But you'll find that my selection for teams really has no rhyme or reason, right? Because if I was born in Queens, then the next two teams that I'm going to tell you about should not be my teams, if you're into that. But I already told you about Dallas, so let's go to it. So anyway, the Rangers were always on TV. And there wasn't a lot of people once I moved to Atlanta to talk to about hockey. I think we had gotten here, and I think shortly after the Thrashers left. So even if I wanted to talk to somebody about hockey, it wasn't like there was a game that we could go to or anything like that. So there's that. And, I didn't start working until much later. Like I was 8 or 9 when we came to Atlanta. So by the time I got a job to be able to buy or do things later, and I'll never forget, my first purchase was somebody's pre-owned football jerseys that I really wanted, and he sold them to me for like $150, and my mom was furious. She was like, "This is what you spent your check on? You don't have any money?" Well, I hadn't had a football jersey in years, so, and since I wasn't really allowed to wear them all that often, now that I'm an adult, I wear them all the time. So take that, Mom. But anyway, back to hockey. We really didn't have a place to go to watch a game. And then hockey is even more difficult to watch on TV in the South, right? Unless you're Florida, who has 2 hockey teams, And I hear that they're trying to bring back another hockey team to Atlanta, which I think would be great. But during my time, there was no hockey team there. And I had gone through school or whatever, and I had been best friends with Danny for many years. And she said to me, she started, watching the Pittsburgh Penguins. She turned on the TV, saw them playing, and she was like, this is going to be my team. And sometimes for some of us, that's really all it takes. She said to me in passing, like, I'm really into hockey. I was like, finally, I get to say to somebody, I really enjoy hockey. We were chattering back and forth about that for many ages. And she was like, well, who would be your team? Well, it would have to be the last team that I ever watched play. Even though I was 8 at the time, I'm not going to change that. I have devotion, loyalty to my teams. Okay. if I ever first locked eyes on you, that's probably it. You know. And I said probably the New York Rangers. She was like, ew. The great thing about me and Danny is that we refuse to like the same things, especially when it comes to sports teams. We just refuse. So she knew there was no way I was ever going to be a Pens fan. But she said to me, this was probably in 2020. I don't think that we had did much talking about going to games, because we knew it would have to be kind of an excursion to get to a place that had a hockey team, right? You were probably going up north during the winter time, and she and I are delicate flowers. So, it was interesting. But it was 2019. We went to see the Predators play in Tennessee, and I'll never forget it. She said to me, I found this group online called the Black Girl Hockey Club, and I think you and I should join so we could have other people to talk to about hockey. Black people who realize that Black people play hockey, and have been for years. The history of the sport of hockey and things like that. And so I was like, I'm not doing anything. And she said to me, hey, they're going as a group. So people are coming from all over the country to go to this game as part of this club. And I was like, okay, let's do it. I had been to Nashville before, so, sometimes that's part of the lure for me. But I was just so excited to see what this was about, and it did not disappoint. It was cold as all get out, but we got in there. I had ice skated for the first time in years, which started out as not a good thing, but it ended up being okay. Danny, for her part, is very good at many things. Naturally good at them. So she never had any trouble. If she tells you that she had trouble, she'll probably listen to this when it comes out, and she'll be like, oh, she's lying. I'm not lying. I want you to know that. She's very naturally talented at things. So we got to go ice skating with all of the people. We got to walk around, and we met. I have pictures of meeting PK Subban. I didn't realize there was a women's hockey league, so that was fun. We got to watch their all-star game and skills competition, so that was hilarious. And to be surrounded by people who all enjoyed the same thing as me and knew more than me. I always like to learn about things, so they knew more than me, and we were able to go and spend time and have a good time, and then go back to the hotel room and just kind of wait. It was great. So I was like, man, I hope I get to do that again. And so then you're, kind of return home, and then, you live in an area where they don't have all that kind of sports coverage yet. So, in 2020 though, she called me and she said, the Pens are having a game that the Black Girl Hockey Club is going to. And I believe the leader of the club, Renee, the Penguins are her favorite team. So she was taking everybody there. And I was like, oh, okay. She was like, do you want to go? I'm never going to turn down going to a sporting event, by the way. By the way, sporting events are the way to my heart. Thank you for asking. So I told her, I was like, I actually do want to see, my team play as well. And Danny put me on hold. She, in her way, hold please. And she said, she came back like 5 minutes later, and she was like, hey, they're going to leave from Pittsburgh and go to New York and see a game in New York. I said, we just make it like, I think it was like a 5-day trip where we land in Pittsburgh and take the train to New York. And I was like, oh, let's do it. So flew there. That was an excellent time because she actually won a raffle to ride the Zamboni during the game. So they bought us down. I think it was before the game. She rode it and we got to watch the guys warm up. It was such a surreal experience to be that close to people who we had seen playing on TV. You know, we also got to do an outreach program with the Penguins organization and help the kids in the school system and kind of be with them for an assembly during the day. It was such a fun time. Such a fun time. If I had to do it again, I definitely would. And then we hopped on the train. Next thing you know, we're in New York City, taking Madison Square Garden. And that was a good time as well. Listening to, we had interviews and I got to meet Anson Carter. So that was fun. I took a picture with him. He was great, So a lot happened during that trip. The other thing that happened during that trip was that was the first and only opportunity I had to see Henrik Lundqvist play, who, just like in football, I had a favorite position, running back. Goalies are my favorite thing to watch in hockey, whether I'm watching my favorite team or not. Their technique, what they do that does work, what they do that may or may not work for them, and how they work in tandem with their defensemen. It's always fun for me. Shesterkin is the best predecessor we could have hoped to have after Hank. I'm sad that the way that things went for Hank, but for me, I was glad to have seen him play that last game, even if we didn't win, which was against the Dallas Stars. But, made some great connections. I can't wait to do another event where we go and hang out and meet. And I think for me, they had quoted me in a newspaper, and I think they showed both Danny and I in some of the footage that they put on their website. So good times. So hockey, just like football, is a contact sport. Like sometimes even more so because they be breaking out in fights and things like that. But it is like adrenaline pumping from start to finish if you're not careful. I can't tell you how many times my Apple Watch has asked me, like, are you having a heart attack? Are you having a conniption? Because you might need help. We might have to call you an ambulance or something. No worse than when a few years back the Rangers were playing the Penguins in the first round of the playoffs, and I just was stressed the whole time. It was very stressful for me because on the one hand, I was thinking, if we do not win this, I will never hear the end of this from Danny. Never. And of course, we have to go to a game 7 because that's the most stressful thing as possible. All kind of stuff was going on. That first game went like 3 overtimes, which I did not find out until a couple years ago when I was watching that game, that unlike in the regular season, there is no 3-on-3 overtime for 5 minutes and then we move to a shootout. In playoffs, we just play another period until somebody scores. Oh, it just went on and on. And I remember saying to Danny the next day, how are you able to keep your adrenaline from spiking? How are you able to sleep? She said, oh no, I didn't watch that. I can't take the playoffs. That sounds like a stressful time. And it was a stressful time. So, she's full of good ideas. So there's that. But it is, playoff time is the most exciting time. We got, especially at that time, I got a lot of great commercials coming out of New York featuring Method Man of all people. Then we moved on to Carolina, and then we played my sister's team, my sister lives down in Florida, and she's like, I'm a lightning girly, so I got two people that are close to me whose teams have won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and come on, guys, what are we doing? Do something for me. So next is going to be the Yankees. I had always been kind of a baseball fan. And again, this was another thing that I had watched when I was up north for the time being. And again, every time I turned on the TV, the Yankees were on TV. But like I said earlier, I was born in Queens. So don't judge me. But, and I think my dad asked me, like, you were born in Queens. How did you end up a Yankees fan? Answer, Derek Jeter. And just watching him play has always been fun for me. I don't think that I ever thought I would be able to see them play. Right? And I still haven't traveled to New York. So that's like on my bucket list to travel to New York. I traveled to New York to see the Rangers play. And I think I said to y'all, like, I got to see them last year play the Islanders at the Stadium Series. And that was an experience that I will never forget. Overtime almost sent me into a heart attack situation again. And it was 26 degrees outside. But as far as baseball is concerned, I have not gone to see the Yankees play in New York. They've played the Braves a few times that I've gone to see. And, as far as tickets are concerned, baseball tickets are, well, in Atlanta, were easy for me to come by. I don't know that they're that cheap in New York, but I couldn't wait to visit family in New York because, like I said, you're living outside of the state that your team plays in. That means you have to order merch online, or if you're like me and old, you have to order it through a catalog, which nobody was going to do for me. I did not have a credit card. So I had to wait until we were going to visit grandma or whomever back home in New York. And then I would be able to go to a great little place called Bodell's and be able to pick up jerseys and things like that. So I had a Alex Rodriguez jersey that I was very proud of. Pinstripes, very proud of for the longest time. And I think the last time that Danny and I were in New York, and I think that was for that Rangers game that I was just talking about, where Hank was, that was his last game. I had gone there and they were all going out of business. I was so heartbroken, but everything was on sale. So I bought a bunch of stuff that I probably didn't need. And that being a Lundqvist jersey. So I have two Lundqvist jerseys, by the way. One regular blue and then one Winter Classic jersey. So, but Modell's was a great place for me because they had everybody that was on a team, especially if you were in New York, everybody who was on the team at that time. There was no need to special order, or if you wanted something stitched, they would do it right there. Modell's was a great place. Bring it back. And I just remember, watching the games and being like, this is a long game. But being like, okay, I bought the stuff, and now when the Yankees come to Atlanta, I'm going to have to watch them play. And we did. We watched it at the old stadium, Turner Field, and I was there when Alex Rodriguez hit a grand slam. My mother's friend had season tickets to see the Atlanta Braves, and he took us. And it was like four of us: my mom, him and my sister and I. And he's trying to convince her, like, it's great. It's fine. You're going to love it. And he was under the impression that we were all Braves fans, but sadly we were not. And of course I showed up in my Alex Rodriguez jersey, and then A-Rod hit a grand slam. That's another thing that I'll probably never forget. So the A-Rod grand slam and the Artemi Panarin overtime win in the Stadium Series last year. Good time. Needless to say, my mom's friend was not happy. Oh well, my team won. But my father is a huge Mets fan, and I'm probably going to have to plan something next year where I come and watch a game with him, Subway Series or something like that. But, the Yankees have had a lot of great players for me to watch. Mr. October, Hideki Matsui, Herman the Babe. But I watched all of the history of the Yankees because I was part of the Columbia House DVD Club. So they had all kind of like sports dynasty DVDs and things like that. And so the Yankees were one of them. And I got to the bottom of like all of the history of all of their players. Man, fantastic, fantastic stuff. So that's my plan for the upcoming year. So that leaves the New York Knicks. And that was something that I got into probably in 2023. And I had not much interest in basketball for many years because I had tried out for the middle school basketball team, and I made it. And then my coach was the most miserable thing I had ever seen. And so I, who was a bit athletic at that time and was interested in playing basketball at that time, it was very cliquey. And so I was just like, maybe basketball is not for me. So I just kind of wrote it off. But I think I got Fubo TV, and I paid extra for a sports package. And when I tell you, I spend time watching a lot of things that I probably would not otherwise have watched. And so the Knicks are one of those teams. And it just made sense. The odd thing out here is always going to be the Dallas Cowboys, but the Knicks fit into the Rangers-Yankees vibe. They play in the same stadium as the Rangers, so it was a no-brainer for me. And it was fun watching them play and try to understand the game and try to understand, like, what's a foul, what's not a foul, why does this, garner a free throw and whatnot. But let me tell you something. A couple of years ago, both the Knicks and the Rangers were in the playoffs, and it was back-to-back games. So each team had a day off in between, right? But if you were a fan of both teams, then you had to watch like game after game after game after game. And so that was an exciting time, and it was not something I want to do again. So there's that. But I remember vividly my mom coming downstairs and being like, "So what are you doing?" I was like, "Shh, we have 30 seconds left. I have to see what happens." That playoff series with the 76ers and, Tyrese Maxey getting the ball, and I was always scared that he was going to put the nail in the coffin for us, but that was such hard fought wins. And again, like, a lot of people were traded away, and I was not prepared for that. But it was so fun to see them all playing together, having a good time, figuring out strategies to win and things like that. So needless to say, I traveled back to New York to do a doubleheader weekend with the Rangers and the Knicks playing. So I went to see the Rangers play the Penguins, and then came back the next day to see the Knicks play Boston. Sadly, both of my teams lost. What kind of nonsense was that? But it was a good time to be in New York and be amongst other fans of the same team, So Fun times. So in 2023, I got a feel for Knicks life very quickly. So I was ready for the 2024 season. I got my gear, I'm ready to go. And that did not disappoint. I got to go to a game with my dad. And that was fun. I got to go to a game here where I live because they came to here on their travel days. And that was also fun. There's a lot of New York fans in both hockey and basketball that live in the South where I live. So that was also fun. The Knicks family is very open and loving. The Rangers family is very open and loving to new fans. And so is the Yankees family. So I felt like I had made the right decisions when it comes to picking teams. Although people from Queens will always ask, like, if you had picked the Islanders and the Mets and then the Knicks, like your colors would all be the same. They would all be orange and blue. And that would have made life a little bit easier for me. But the funniest thing to me is meeting somebody from New York who's also a sports fan and then wondering, do they have the same combination of teams as you? So, of course, Dallas is out of the realm on that. But the number of people that are like Giants, Knicks, Mets, Islanders, Jets, Rangers, Brooklyn, whatever. And so there's always a great mix of teams, And speaking of basketball, I got into also watching women's basketball and, in the same vein supported the New York Liberty. And that was fun because they won the championship. So shout out to the women out there. There was an article that came out many years ago. And then one that they tried to put on Twitter the other day where it had said something like New York teams haven't won a championship in at least 15 years. Well, that can't be true because the New York Liberty did it last year. So there you go. And that Ellie mascot is probably the best thing I've ever seen. So, Knicks, Rangers, Yankees, let's get us a mascot out here, okay? And I may be in the minority for that because the more sports fans that I talk to, they're like, we don't need a mascot. You probably don't, but I would enjoy one because, the Pens have one. Come on. So, yeah. I think the amount of games in a season for both hockey and basketball being 82 is a lot for me, but I think it's great because it gives me something to focus on during the winter months, right? Baseball being 162 games gives me something else to focus on when hockey and basketball are not on. Football, I need y'all to step your game up, okay? Seriously. So there's that. And then with that being said, with Fubo TV giving me access to all kind of different sports, they have like this Olympic channel that just shows you all kind of things. I started watching rugby. I don't know that I could pick a team there though, but that is fun watching. Okay. If you like football, then rugby is probably right up your alley. That's like serious sport right there. No pads, no nothing, just going at it, I was always an X Games girly too. So, people talking about Tony Hawk and, Dave Mira and all of the legends. Snowboarding and certain things being allowed at the Olympics has been fantastic for me. But I used to love the X Games, both winter and summer, because I often wondered if I would ever get the opportunity to learn how to do those things. But I'm still trying to figure out snowboarding. Again, another thing Danny is great at. Okay. So yeah, the X Games, that was something that I watched during the summer when nothing else was on. I think I flipped on the channel and it was on. And all I need is a competition to be going on for me to watch. So that was fantastic. And then the Olympics in general. I don't think I was ever an Olympics watcher until about 10 years ago when I met my friend Siobhan. We were watching like figure skating and, all of the winter sports. So that was fun. Bobsled and things like that. But the Summer Olympics are always fun for me. Track and field, shot put, the javelin throw, it's serious business. Hurdles, it's serious business. And them people have trained for many years for that. And I always sit back on the couch thinking I could never do any of these things. Shout out to these people. So, and I like the fact that it's a series of days events, right? Because it, again, gives me something to focus on. Watching our guys that you may see on the Yankees or on the Knicks or on the Rangers play for their countries when it comes to the Olympics as well is also a fun thing. So, certain guys being able to represent USA in basketball and baseball and hockey is always fun. So, good times. And I think lastly, I think I said earlier that I really enjoy the strongman competition. Again, if the X Games was not on during when I was supposed to be doing summer reading, but like in fact really wasn't doing summer reading, and I stumbled onto the strongman competition, I wanted to see how far somebody could drag a train, drag a car. That was my thing. And it's gotten even more competitive over the years. So shout out to Thor Bjornsson. I really want to see that dude lift 501 kg. I think he could do it. But yes, for me, sports have been something that I know I can turn to kind of quote unquote relax, as long as it's not playoff time. Stuff that I could like discuss with my family. We could always talk about what's going on. Who's got the better strategy? Who's got the better team set up? It's always fun to me to relate to other people who enjoy sports. Those are my teams. Don't try to change my mind. Sadly, you never know. Because aside from the New York Liberty, the article is right in that, men's sports haven't won in a very long time. But New York also has two soccer teams or football teams. And I probably need to look and see who I'm going to assign my allegiance to, and just, go the whole gamut. I may or may not switch football teams. No, I'm kidding. I'm probably never going to switch football teams. So just is what it is. Devastation. But anyway, that's it for me this week. Maybe next week or at some point I'll have Danny come on and talk about her obsession with sports and where that all began. And we'll go from there. I'll see y'all.